This new year, it's time to do wellness on your terms. That's where Ollie comes in. Thanks to their delightful gummies, you can actually get a good night's sleep. And you might finally stand a chance of staying focused. Because this is the year of you. Discover Ollie vitamins and supplements. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Today on CityCast Madison. Natural, wild, and free. That's the slogan of this year's Leopold Week, a week-long virtual speaker series dedicated to the ideas and land ethic of one of Wisconsin's most famous conservationists, Aldo Leopold. And they've got some heavy hitters on this year's lineup. We sat down with Buddy Huffaker, the executive director at the Leopold Foundation, to hear about what they've got in store. It's Monday, March 4th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Buddy, hello.
Greetings. Great to be with you, Bianca.
Great to have you. So Aldo Leopold is easily one of the most legendary environmentalists, and he's a Wisconsinite. What would you say his most enduring legacy is?
Well, Aldo Leopold's most enduring legacy is his book, A Sand County Almanac. It's sold millions of copies. It's translated into 15 different languages. So in 2024, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the publication of that book. And so It says something special that 75 years later, we're still talking about it. So that's how most people know Aldo Leopold. But to your point, he was involved in all aspects of conservation. And really, a lot of people call him the father of the modern day conservation movement.
Ooh, I love that. So I feel like we should say, speaking of legacy, the last remaining child of Aldo, Estella, just passed away. And I know she was a major part of keeping the Leopold legacy going. Our condolences.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for marking the end of an era. Estella passed away at 97. She was a trailblazing scientist herself, inducted into the National Academy of Sciences in 1974. So breaking new grounds in paleoecology and as a woman scientist, and a absolute dynamo of an individual.
Yeah. You know, I loved their story and their story as a family growing up. So I'm a fellow Barabooian.
That's
represent.
Right. Yeah. Coming from the neighborhood.
From the neighborhood. I grew up visiting the Aldo Leopold shack and, hearing about his story. And I own like multiple versions of A Sand County Almanac. There's like the big version with all the images, of our county. And it's got a universal appeal. And it's not every day. This might be stealing one of your quotes, that you find a book that appeals to both hunters and vegans.
Yeah. No, Leopold is really amazing in his ability to kind of cross all sorts of political, socioeconomic divides. And I think it really just gets down to, he writes beautifully about the natural world. So if you can look at a tree and find a beautiful, or are amazed by a beautiful bird, or just see the sun's rise in the morning, like, he's capturing all those emotions we all have, but he can articulate it in the lyricism of a poet, where most of us are just like, oh, that's cool and awesome. And so when you read his writing, you're like, oh yeah, that's how I would describe it. I just can't do it that well.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's something that's taught to people studying environmentalism and land resource management, like, across the country.
And, I mean, to your point, one of the things that, often in Wisconsin, we have such a great kind of conservation heritage and legacy because we have such a beautiful landscape all around us. But we often forget that Leopold really is this global figure. I mean, any class across the country that's on environmental science or studies, you're going to read at least a passage from a Sand County Almanac. And as I mentioned, it's been translated into 15 different languages. So he does provide one of these kind of foundational pieces for anybody anywhere who cares about the natural world. And so we're celebrating Leopold Week this week with virtual programming that will connect literally thousands of people from all across the world. Last year, we had 7,500 people from 14 different countries participate.
Holy smokes. That's a lot of folks.
It's a lot of folks. And it's so fun to see the chat. People talk about where they're at, whether it's California or Croatia, talking about what's happening in their community and how they're advancing the land ethic and why they're there to be part of the conversation.
I had this early experiences with Aldo Leopold, thinking he's a local hero, as a kid, which he is. And then, I don't know, I was like 15. I went out to Northern California and I learned that he was like pivotal in protecting coastal regions out in California in this like pristine majesty that I had never seen before. And then I felt so much pride, I'm like, he's a big deal.
He's a big deal. And, so another anniversary that we're celebrating is the 100th anniversary of the Gila Wilderness in New Mexico, southern New Mexico. And it was his vision in 1922 that this place was so special that it should be protected from development, mainly roads. That was the threat to wild areas at that time. And so he came up with this idea to protect it as a wilderness area, and it became the model. Now there are 110 million acres across the United States that are protected as wilderness, where we're recognizing these are unique and special ecological, biological places, and we need to protect them from ourselves. From Western society that likes to just roll over everything. And we want to keep them wild and sacred into the future. And so he's the architect of that effort as well.
Yeah. And at Leopold Week 2024, the moniker, it's natural, wild, and free.
And that's taken right out of his foreword, where he talked about that this book is for those who cannot live without wild things. And then he challenges us to reframe our thinking about how the world needs to operate and stay healthy by keeping things wild, natural, and free.
Well, having spent some time, on the Wisconsin River, just like looking at it and seeing like the sandbars and that sort of thing and understanding, when you read the book, you feel like you're transported to somewhere really special.
It is. And again, you can join us for Leopold Week this week, and you can register for that at aldoleopold.org. But come out to the Leopold Shack. I mean, it now sits right along the Wisconsin River. It's what in the height of the Dust Bowl and Depression, what did the Leopold family do? They planted pine trees. You got to start where you can and just get your hands dirty and do something. And so that's what they would do. They bought this little piece of property. They'd come up from Madison on the weekends, and they would plant thousands of trees, and then they would all die because of the drought and Dust Bowl era climate. And then they'd come back out the next year and plant another 3,000 pine trees. And finally, they all started to take root. And now you can see what happens when you invest in a place and take care of it and restore it to health. It sits right on the Wisconsin River. And in the fall of the year, we have this awesome crane viewing program where we'll have 15,000 sandhill cranes come to roost every night on the river right behind the Leopold Shack.
Yeah, I feel like I just got so friggin' lucky growing up in Baraboo, and then if folks don't know about this, the International Crane Foundation is also in Baraboo.
Right down the road, and has its kind of own origin stories back to Leopold and Sand County Almanac, because one of the founders, Ron Sowie, from the Baraboo family, grew up reading a Sand County Almanac in high school. The high school teacher, Gerald Scott, I'm pretty sure he was not still teaching when you were in school, Bianca, but introduced generations.
But that bird case was still there.
The bird case is there. Passenger pigeons in the Baraboo High School.
Yeah, I was just steeped in, the thinking and the ideas that are in this book, the land ethic, the things that many folks hold dear today. I did want to ask, why do you think a Sand County Almanac has the message in it has such a wide appeal?
Well, I think, again, a lot of it is attributable to Leopold's beautiful prose. He's just a good writer, and he worked hard at being a good writer. It's also that it is grounded in science. So, unlike Henry David Thoreau or John Muir or some of the other early nature writers, he was a better scientist. I mean, science had just come along further.
Snap.
Yeah. And so I think it's solid scientifically. And then I think, again, he articulates things that we all feel. And the book is structured for you to go on this journey with him. And so it's kind of like taking a walk with your grandfather, right? The first part is just like what happens over the months of the year and what you see and what you do. And then the next section is like, okay, we saw some things, we learned some things. What's going on here? What's wrong with the community? And how do we kind of start to think differently about it? And then the final section is these philosophical essays that really challenge us to rethink our relationship to each other and to the natural world. How do we hold community health together individually and collectively? And I think that message is just still so relevant, right? I mean, we're facing climate change. None of us can solve that individually, but we all have an individual role to play. And then collectively, we have to band together and take collective action and collective policy action that can mitigate and lessen the impacts of climate change. So I think the message is relevant. The package is short, right? Like you can kind of read a chapter or you can read the whole thing. And now it feels like you're part of this global community of care. It's not just me as an individual out there caring about this stuff, but Bianca cares too, right? And millions of people care about this stuff, and I'm part of that community, and that gives you a little bit of hope and energy to keep fighting.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
This episode is brought to you by JLL. Get an insider view into the world of commercial real estate with JLL's podcast, Trends and Insights, the Future of Commercial Real Estate. Whether you're curious about making cities more sustainable, the evolution of office space, or AI opportunities, this podcast will help keep you a step ahead. Tune in for candid conversations with business leaders about the biggest trends impacting how we live, work, and play. Subscribe to Trends and Insights now at jll.com/podcast.
What kind of lessons do you feel like Aldo Leopold from his writings and thinking has for us now today?
I always say the most important line in the whole book is where he writes, when we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. And so basically what he's challenging us to do is recognize, just as you said, we're a part of this biological community. We're not separate from it. And if we recognize that, then we're going to start to extend some of the same ethical consideration and care to the flora and fauna as we do our friends and family. Like we're all in this together, right? Like nobody gets out of this without a healthy landscape. We need clean air. We need clean water. We need healthy food. We want wildlife populations to look at, to have the beauty and the diversity of life all around us. These are all things we need as at the individual and community level. And then I think the other part that is so beautiful about Leopold and brilliant is at the end, he kind of invites us all into it. So his other important line is that nothing as important as an ethic is ever written. It evolves in the minds of the thinking community. Here we are. We're in a conservation conversation, Bianca. It's the thinking community, and your listeners, like, they're it. We're all part of this, and we all got to work together. And I think that's the thing, like, it's not Leopold's land ethic, it's our land ethic. And that's what Leopold Week is about, is also amplifying all these other voices that are out there today, writing about, thinking about, acting upon how we move forward together in a better fashion.
Well, speaking about celebrating Leopold with this week of events, what are you most excited about? What's on deck?
Well, we got a great lineup. And so from eco-fiction, Diane Wilson, an Indigenous author who's kind of, again, telling the story in a different way. In a lot of environmental conservation writing is nonfiction. And here she invites us into a story in a different way and to imagine a future in a different way using the tool of fiction. And then we have Lyonda Howe, who wrote Rooted, that is kind of these little vignettes about how do we rethink about and act differently in our place and time and with our neighbors. And then we have a beautiful book that is in celebration of the Gila called First and Wildest. And we have the editor and several contributors from different cultural backgrounds that are trying to look at and understand this same place from different lenses, right? And different backgrounds. And so what does that mean? How do we understand place differently given what our cultural backgrounds are, religious backgrounds? And it's really a beautiful poem of a book to the Gila in this special place. And I think provides a model of how we engage diversity for conservation and environmental justice in different ways. And then our kind of big headliner is Ed Yong, the author, science writer of An Immense World. And if people have read that and are like, I thought I knew a lot about the natural world, and then I read this book, I was like, oh my gosh, I know nothing. Like there's so
We're
much more to
scratching the
know out there.
surface.
Yeah. So it's absolutely fascinating. So every program is awesome in its own right. We close the week with our own fellows. So these are young people who have spent about 9 months with us. The total experience is 12 months. But they'll share some of the things that they've learned stomping on the same ground that you have, Bianca, at and around the shack, and learning to come to know a place over 4 seasons and doing prescribed burning and invasive species control and greeting guests. And like, so what does this place mean to them as individuals and to the body of people that they've come to interact with over this time? And if you want any inspiration for what the future could look like and that we actually are passing it on to good hands, these are 5 amazing individuals.
I mean, those voices sound fantastic. That sounds like a really, really great lineup. Having Indigenous voices talking about, how we connect from where we stand and how that impacts how we might be a part of our land ethic. I also do need to say that Mr. Ed Yong is basically a journalistic hero. Like all the journalist community, it was just like had a huge journalist crush on his writing during the pandemic.
Yeah,
he's looking at the little things, the smaller parts that we don't see all the time.
Yeah, and I love also like he espouses all this technical scientific information, and then he comes up with this really simple analogy that like even I can understand and use. And so it's amazing the way he communicates really dense information, keeps it fun. And yeah, I mean, there's arguably no better scientific journalist working today than Ed Yong.
Truly.
And all this is free. You just have to register. You sign up, you can come to one or you can come to all. They'll all be recorded too, so you can come back and watch and engage the conversation later. But obviously a bit more fun to be present in the moment as the conversation is unfolding.
Yeah, you kind of express this, but one of the missions of your organization is like getting folks excited about the wilderness. And I loved this part of your bio. You've been working with the organization for 20 years.
They haven't figured out how to get rid of me.
I'm sure they love you. But I saw you said like you did things from, being a field botanist to running a chainsaw and act as a line boss on prescribed burns. So like really getting your hands in the dirt, really being involved in all the different ways that, contribute to the community. And I did want to ask you, like, what do you think are some ways to inspire folks to enjoy the wilderness?
Well, and make a kind of technical distinction between wilderness and wildness. So wilderness is this kind of federally designated, these are big, large, national forests or wildlife refuges. But wildness is really present anywhere. I mean, Madison is really blessed to have a great park system and county parks in the surrounding areas. And the farmers market. I mean, you walk around the farmers market in downtown Madison. I mean, you have wildness all around. You have these locally grown products from farmers that are doing regenerative agriculture. We are really kind of blessed in Wisconsin for the diversity of natural resources, cultural resources that are accessible and available to us. And I think it's just kind of getting out and availing yourself to it. And so, whether that's growing your own tomato plant in a 5-gallon bucket, on your stoop, or visiting and volunteering in a county park, or going up to a national forest in northern Wisconsin. I think you just have to find what your interest and opportunity is. And there's a huge network here in Wisconsin that can help make available opportunities.
Yeah. For sure. I feel like I got really excited about mushrooms. There's a lot of mushroom, but talking about networks, mycelial networks and underground. Yeah. And I spent time at Devil's Lake, like pulling up mustard to see an invasive species. There's stuff like that all across Madison. There's Aldo Leopold Center here,
Well, yeah, right there in Monona, the Aldo Leopold Nature Center. It's named in honor of Aldo Leopold. They have about 30,000 school kids come through programming there, everything from how to identify frog calls to making maple syrup. And there's the UW Arboretum right there in Madison. There's Old Brook Botanical Gardens. Again, just get out and walk around. And there's all these great conservation and environmental organizations that are coalescing energy and creating opportunities for people.
It's one of the most prideful things, at least for me, and being here in Madison. So this is so fun talking to you and waxing poetic on this. Literally, we're waxing poetic. He was writing poetry.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, is there like a modern day Aldo Leopold here in Wisconsin?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, again, I think that's part of what we're trying to do with Leopold Week is amplify these great voices that are writing out there. She's not in Wisconsin, but she got her PhD in Wisconsin. Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, it's as beautiful or more beautiful than a Sand County Almanac. And it's coming from her Potawatomi perspective and how she's learning to blend traditional ecological knowledge and Western science. So Robin Wall Kimmerer is one voice that everybody should be familiar with.
We count people who got degrees from UW-Madison. We claim you, just so y'all know. Not maybe all of you, but most of you.
And then I have the great fortune to collaborate a lot with Kurt Miney, who's a senior fellow here. He did the kind of definitive biography of Aldo Leopold, but he's involved with all sorts of conservation efforts and writes a lot about the driftless part of the state of Wisconsin. And so he has contributed in many ways to just kind of the thinking and conservation and community building here in Wisconsin.
As you said, like, it's a global event. So y'all really bring the heat when it comes to Leopold Week. Any last thoughts before we let you go?
Well, one more plug for listeners that haven't read a Sand County Almanac before. There's a relatively new anniversary edition with a foreword by Barbara Kingsolver, recent Pulitzer Prize winner, about how Leopold inspired her and her writing. And so if you need to get a copy in your own hands so that you can be part of this celebration, you can check us out and get that at our website as well.
Buddy, it's just been a tremendous honor and pleasure talking to you about Leopold Week. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Continue on, Bianca. Love seeing all your success and love CityCast.
Thank you. That's Buddy Huffaker, Executive Director at the Leopold Foundation. If you want to learn more about or register for Leopold Week, head to our show notes for a link. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with your wildest friend, the one who knows how to let their freak flag fly. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, stay wild.